All right. Oh, good morning. So last week we were talking about moving from all of the study. So moving from the historical cultural analysis, the written contextual analysis, the lexical syntactical analysis, and then the theological analysis, all of that. That's all the study. Considering figures of speech, the genre of scripture that you're reading or studying. Maybe it's apocalyptic literature, maybe it's prophecy, maybe it's just a historical narrative, maybe it's poetry out of the Psalms. All of those details, all of those things matter in how you're going to interpret the text. And from the very beginning, what we've been trying to do is figure out what the original author intended to communicate to the original audience. That's what the Bible means. Now, the Bible wasn't written to us. It was written for us, but it's not to us. It was to the original audience. And keeping that in mind is helpful when we're interpreting. Welcome, welcome. Come on in. And so we're doing all of this background study. We're trying to understand where it fits within history and culture and the differences between ancient culture and modern culture. All of those things are important, so that way we can understand what it meant, and then from what it meant, we can find the theological principles, and then from those theological principles, find our application. And our application will be how it helps us, or what we can learn about God, what we can learn about ourselves, and how that all fits together in applying it to our lives. Last week we talked about principalizing and applying biblical narratives. And for the example, we looked at the temptation in Eden. We looked at Eve being tempted by the serpent, and what were the principles that came out of that. So again, so you can kind of see an ish right here, but the idea is we're moving from particulars, and this is in the text, and then we're going to go to principles, but these are universals. These are principles. And then particulars again. And this is the text, right? That's ancient, and this is today, our lives. So this is the application. All right, so a text has one meaning, but it can have a myriad of applications, lots and lots of applications. And the particulars are where it applies. So that would be the particulars of your life, for example. Last week we talked about the fall narrative, the principles that Verkler, and this was right out of the book that we've been going through. It's the Hermeneutics book that we've been talking about. He pulled out a bunch of different principles. So if you remember the fall narrative, the serpent comes and talks to Eve and convinces her that God is withholding something. Like there's something that God is holding back from Eve, and that he must have a bad motivation for doing that. There must be something wrong with God. So the temptation is to think that God is a liar in some way. And it's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And he's like, hey, are you allowed to eat of any of the trees? And the answer is yes, you can eat from any tree except for one. And so that first principle was maximizing the restriction. So instead of focusing on everything that God had provided, she's focused on the one thing that she's not allowed to have. Right? Next is the minimize the consequences of sin. The next thing he says is just a direct lie. She goes, you're not supposed to eat of it or touch it lest we die. And he goes, you will not surely die. That's just a flat out lie. It's the exact opposite of what God had told Adam just a few verses earlier. And so you minimize the consequences of sin. Right? You will not certainly die, or you not certainly die. And it shifts the focus away from negative outcomes of sin. And again, so you're maximizing the restriction and then minimizing the consequences. And this is what temptation is, what's happening during temptation, or what can happen. And then it's mislabeling the action. And of course, like a good preacher, everything starts with M. Hope you're noticing. I don't know if Verkler's a Baptist, but he's behaving like one. Mislabeling the action is presenting disobedience as expanding her consciousness. It's like God knows that when you eat of that fruit, your eyes will be open and you'll be able to discern good and evil just like him. It's like, oh, see, why doesn't he want you to do that? What's up with God? It's weird. And so she looks at it, and it's the fruit was good for food. It was pleasing to the eyes. And it was something that would make her wise. Like, oh, okay. And once she locked those things in her mind, and all of those things started working against what God had said. It's like, but it is pleasing to the eye. Like, yeah, sin can be beautiful. Can be. You can mix good, like food is good for you, right? It's good for your body. Why would God withhold that food versus any other food? What's up with that? It's good. It's good for my body. What's going on here? Right? Mixing sin with beauty is pleasing to the eye. And then misunderstanding the implications. This is the tough one. It says Eve's acceptance of Satan's lie implicitly called God a liar. And this is what happens every time we sin. We implicitly call God a liar. We go, God doesn't actually have our best interests at heart. That's what sin declares. It's like, oof. So many of those things are present in temptation, anytime we're tempted to sin. It's not always present. It's not always going to be these things. But again, we're looking at the particulars of the story of Eve in the garden with the serpent. And then we pull out these universal principles like maximizing the restriction, right? And then you can think in your own life, okay, when I'm tempted to sin, whichever direction that goes, how is the restriction being maximized? What in my thinking is being maximized and overtaking my rational thinking? What's overtaking that? And then what am I saying to myself to minimize the consequences of sin? What am I doing? And then how am I zhuzhing it up with language about it that mislabels the action? Where it's not, it's not disobedience to God. It's, just expanding my consciousness. It's no big deal, right? Yeah. Does it look good? Is it beautiful? Are we mixing those things? What's going on here? It's almost like David and Bathsheba, right? So he's up on the roof. He's supposed to be out. He's supposed to be bringing the army out to war. It's time for kings to go out to war. He stays home. He's on his roof. So he's on his roof. He's looking down the hill, and there's a beautiful woman bathing on her roof, which was typical because usually if you're on ground level and you look up and people have flat roofs, you can't see what's on the roof. And then they have these tiny little half walls around the roof so people wouldn't fall off. So you'd have the half wall and you're downward looking up, like you wouldn't be able to see someone bathing on the roof. That's a cultural, historical context there. But David having
have those walls, and so I could see you.
Well, if it was high enough, your bathtub wouldn't be like a giant bathtub, and it would usually, unless you had some servants and stuff, in order to heat up that much water for a large bath, like it would take a lot of water. It would take a long time to heat up. If you're bathing, it's going to be, I don't know if you guys have ever seen like colonial bathing practices, but you could have a big tub, but it's going to be a small amount of water, and you're washing yourself, but it's not like you're like soaking in a tub typically. But if you had enough time, enough water, and enough fire, you could soak in a big tub. And if you had a big enough tub, you could do that. But usually you're going to be like sitting and washing yourself with a big thing of water, but you're going to be using the cloth to wash yourself and stuff. But he's on a vantage point, so he can see down, which is he's the king. He's up on, he's on the mountain, and he's also on top of his palace. He can see down, and he can see a beautiful woman bathing. And do you guys remember? He goes, "Send for, get me that woman." He says that, and the person he says that to, well, first he asks who it is, and he's told, "Isn't that Bathsheba? She has a name. The daughter of," I can't remember the guy's name, and it's like, I think he even gives grandfather's name, and it's like wife of Uriah. So David is starting down the road of lust and adultery, and he's given facts to stop him, but he minimizes the consequences, and he just ignores all of the, instead of treating her like a human being who has these personal relationships with other human beings, he treats her as an object of his desire that he wants, and then he just commands that someone go grabs her and brings her to him. It's wild. But he has to ignore truth in order to get what he wants. That's what's going on. And within temptation, that's what has to happen. You have to ignore truth in order to engage in the sin. And it's very similar to these principles. So some of you guys are new here. I don't recognize everybody, but welcome. Also, Adrian, welcome. Joe, Bethany. But if you've been here for any amount of time, and you have talked with me for at least a little bit, I've definitely shared with just about everybody that my temptation, the temptation that pulls me away from the Lord, is pornography. And I think that's super common with just about everybody. If the statistics are correct, then it's like 70% of men in the church struggle with pornography, and about 30 to 40% of women struggle with pornography. That's where it's at least statistically speaking. So I was thinking, all right, how do these principles apply to that? And I'm just going to go through these same principles, and it's the same temptation, but what are the lies that you have to believe? So maximizing the restriction. So now I'm taking the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and I'm making it some pornography. That's the thing that I'm going after, right? So I'm switching those out in the application, right? It means what it means, but this is how it applies to this particular. Are you really supposed to be satisfied with one person? Really, you're gonna. Marriage is one man, one woman, for life. That's God's plan, right? That's what it's supposed to be. Really? There's like 7 billion people in the world. You're supposed to pick one? There's so many options. Why would you restrict yourself to maximize the restriction? Right? I mean, after all, we are animals, right? We have bodies, we have desires. I mean, they're natural, aren't they? These are natural desires. Why are you restricting yourself to just this one thing? Maximizing the restriction, right? Minimizing the consequences of sin. Look, nobody's going to get hurt. It's just videos on the internet. It's not that big a deal. You're in the privacy of your own home. Nobody's getting hurt. Why are you being such a prude? What's going on here? Maximize the restriction, minimize the consequence. Mislabeling the action, right? Presenting disobedience as, in Eve's case, expanding her consciousness. In this case, it's like, look, you should explore pleasure. Pleasure's a good thing. It's part of God's good world. He created us with the capacity to experience pleasure. Again, why are you minimizing the amount that you could have? You could discover new aspects of your sexuality. Why are you withholding that from yourself? And look at how amazing it is for these actors. I'm leaning into that. Right. Mixing good with evil, right? Hey, meat for the body and the body for meat. Isn't that what it says in 1 Corinthians? Right? Look, you need food to live, and we are sexual beings. We are made male and female. That's how it is from the very beginning. That's how God created us to be. So, what's wrong with experiencing pleasure like that? Sex is a good thing. That's how God created it to be. You see how it twists things just a little bit? And then you can just walk down the road. And then, misunderstanding the implications. Again, it's the same thing. God doesn't know what's best for me. I know what's best for me. Because I know that this gives me pleasure, but that doesn't. Well, if that gives me pleasure, and pleasure is a good thing, why would God withhold that from me? Why would he say that that's wrong? Why? There must be something wrong with God, because I know that this is good for me. God doesn't have my best interests at heart. It's all about me, self-focus. These are all little twists on the truth, and they're all lies, all of them. And destroyed my marriage. And it was terrible. I was going through seminary, studying the Bible, while at the same time indulging in pornography. And then it just ripped my marriage apart. And then I get to the end of my seminary degree, and I'm like, well, I can't lead a church because you're supposed to have your house in order if you're going to be a pastor. And who am I? How could I be the biggest hypocrite and try and lead people and following the Lord when I'm not? What in the world is going on here? And I was like, okay. So, studied a lot, but didn't get ordained or anything like that. And it all swirls around believing lies. They're all lies. All of them, right? Are you really supposed to be satisfied with one person? Yes. It's a blessing to have one intimate partner who knows everything about you and still loves you and accepts you. That's mind-blowing. That's godly. And if you believe, more statistics, right? If you believe the statistics, when asked, if you ask the people who are just going around and sleeping around and doing, I'm supposed to be focusing on pornography. This is more of not, but anyways, they're not satisfied with their sex lives because it's just strangers. They don't know anything about, it's terrible. But yes, you're supposed to be, even if it's in the visual through a screen, mediated through a screen, and it's pornography, that's not real. It's not real on multiple levels. It's not real in that they're acting. That's fake. And then it's mediated through a screen. It's only it's what the director wanted. That's not real either. None of it's real. But it seems so real, right? And nobody's getting hurt except for all the people who are completely destroyed by that industry. Just lives ruined left and right. And then it's mind-blowing. You can explore pleasure, and to its max, within the boundaries of what God has created and intended. And it's beautiful. Just imagine if you could trust somebody wholeheartedly and explore pleasure with that person as far as you both want to go. That's what you have. But you have to ignore all the trees that God has created to provide all the fruit in order to maximize this one that you're not supposed to have. Just so dumb. Yes, we do have bodies, and they have certain desires, but you're not supposed to be controlled by it. The meat for the body and the body for meat, right? That's the Corinthian saying. It's it is a good thing. But any good thing, when put into the highest value, becomes an evil thing. Because you're putting it at the highest value, you're putting it in the space of God, and when you take something that is not God and put it in the place of God, it ruins everything. And it ruins your life. It's a cruel master that you end up serving and you can't get away from. That's what pornography does. It's just you go, you tell yourself, I'm not going to do this again. I'm not going to do this again. And then you do it again. And you're devastated, and it's oh, no, okay. I'm not going to do this again. And then it's what's going on? You're a slave to it, Like the moment you think, oh, this won't hurt anybody, this is not a big deal, I'll just, it's this little thing in the secret corner, it's not a big deal, just deny yourself of it. Whatever that is, like in my case, it's pornography, right? Okay, cool. All you have to do is try and deny yourself, whatever your sin is, try and deny yourself of it and see if you're a slave to it. If you can go, no, and then actually live your life telling it no, then you're not a slave to it. Excellent. Leave it there and follow the Lord. But if you can't, that tells you something about how much of a hold that sin has over you. What is it? On Wednesday night, we were talking about love of money and it being the root of all evil, right? And how sometimes it's like when an opportunity to be generous comes up, if in your mind you go, I have to hang on to this money. Like, are you a slave to money? Is it controlling you? Like, Gerald, are you a slave to this pornography? Is it controlling you? Are you making decisions about your life so that way you can go back to this thing? Yeah, you're a slave. It's like, you need to do something about that. If you can say no to it, if you can just be like, nope, I'm done with it and go follow the Lord, great. But usually that's not how that works. It's going to take time to dismantle the lies that you're believing in order to actually pursue the Lord. Because it's like, as you're going this way, these hooks are pulling you back. And you have to take the hooks out. You have to get rid of the lies in order to actually pursue the Lord. See, metaphors, hooks in the back. Like, there's not literal hooks, but it feels like it. Love metaphors. And then God doesn't know me, doesn't know what's best for me. God created you. And he created you with a purpose for life. Are you going to squander that in order to have the pleasure of sin for a short season? Is that what you want? Gerald, do you want to really mess up your marriage, have your wife feel completely betrayed and dishonored, and potentially just find out what the effects are going to be on your daughters? Is that what you want, Gerald? It's like, no. Now I'm maximizing the consequences of sin, and I'm seeing for what they really are. It's like, that's the reality, and I need to go, that's true? Okay, cool. I don't want that. I'm going to run away as far as I can from that. But it's so easy. You just do this. Like, what things am I putting in my way to stop me from going back? Like, who am I confessing my sin to? Who do I what men in the church am I completely honest with? Like, who do you have in your life that you can be completely honest with about your sin? Again, I'm using this particular, because this is me, and I'm the teacher, and this is my experience. But it's an application of the exact same principles of temptation and sin. The exact same thing. Many of the dynamics of Eve's temptation are present in Satan's temptations of believers today. And by noticing these principles, we can see how it applies to our own temptations towards sin. Okay, so next we're going to talk about principalizing from let's see. Wait a second. Okay, yeah. So the guidelines for this kind of principalizing, I think we talked about this last week, but I'll just hit these really quick again, and then we'll get to biblical commands from one culture to another. So focus on the transcultural principles. So again, we're looking for these universal principles that apply transculturally. They're not culture bound, essentially. So principles should be derived Principles derived should be applicable across times and cultures, even if the details change. So, for example, Satan still tempts by maximizing the restriction, but not via a fruit tree. Right? So the particular is a fruit tree, but in my application, it's going to be particular to me or to you, or however the Holy Spirit drives the application home. Meaning from careful analysis. So the principles should be grounded in the text, right, in the author's intended meaning, and derived from careful historical, contextual, and lexical analysis. The principles should be consistent with other teachings of Scripture. So we should be like if we pull a principle out, but it conflicts with other teachings, then we should rethink the principle that we're looking at. Principles can be descriptive and not necessarily prescriptive in all instances. So in this case, it would be if Satan sometimes tempts this way, he doesn't always tempt this way. So if I described it as this is how Satan tempts everybody every single time, like that's not necessarily what the text is teaching. It's not prescriptive for every temptation instance. It's descriptive of this particular. And then there may be one meaning, but many, many applications. So again, the meaning of the text is there, and then we're going to get the principles and then apply it. All right, so biblical commands. The challenging task of applying biblical commands and acknowledging that some are culturally conditioned and thus not normative for believers today, but then some are. How do we make that distinction? So we got biblical commands. All right, sometimes they're just moved directly to us, and sometimes they don't. What was the classic example about greeting each other?
Fully kissed.
That's a command. That's an imperative. If I had chapstick, I'd be putting it on right now. Hope you're ready.
What is it called?
I don't know. Where's the priest? We need to get it blessed. All right. Yeah. All right. Gosh. This is a good illustration of looking at commands, right? It is a biblical command. One, it's in the Bible, right? Greet each other with a holy kiss. It's an imperative. I mean, that's the kind of sentence that it is. So it's a command. You are to do this. Like that's what Paul is telling that church. But we go, it's not how we do it in our culture. So what do? We go, oh, the particular is greeting each other with a holy kiss. What's the principle? Greet each other
Friendly.
right, in a friendly way. Yeah. Like brothers and sisters. Yeah. Okay, so then how do we do that today?
Handshakes.
All right, the right hand of fellowship. Right, you ever heard of that? That's right, let's offer each other the right hand of fellowship. Yeah, so you just got to, right. It's not biblical though. It says holy kiss. Both cheeks. Let's go. All right. So what are we doing? We're doing the same process. We're taking the particulars of the text, finding the principle, and then making an application within our own cultural context. The transcultural, right, different time, different culture, the transcultural principle is a greeting each other. Like, we should be friendly to each other.
In a simple way.
Yeah, hey, how's it going? Howdy, something like that. Elbows, right? Yeah, maybe you're like, I don't like touching people at all. It's like, cool, a little bit of this, a little bit of this. What? Be friendly to each other. Like, have you guys ever had the experience of walking into a church and nobody says anything to you?
Yes.
How does that make you feel? All warm and fuzzy. I love being around. Yeah, I don't want to go back. It's like, whoa. Although I I have met people who are like, don't talk to me. They just don't want to be bothered. They want to like slip into the back. Like, please don't talk to me. I'm already uncomfortable. Oh, like
Read the room.
there are people like that. Yeah, read the room. Yeah, there you go. But that's like if they're new, like they don't know anybody, it's already an uncomfortable situation. I get that. But if you're a community that's watching out for each other and gets to know each other, like be friendly to each other. Like actually do that. Get to know each other. Like be vulnerable with each other. Trust each other. Love each other. Forgive each other. All of these things, they all come together in the church community. All of it. But in our cultural context, in the way that we do it. So, one of the problems with this is many evangelical churches implicitly agree that some commands, right, are not adopted wholesale today. And more controversially, issues like women preaching or husband-wife roles raise questions about cultural applicability. So what that means is some people will take the particulars of a text and say, no, it needs to go all the way to here, right? What it says is the universal principle, and so it needs to be applied all the way across no matter what culture you're in. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes it's not. The Holy Kiss is a good example of how it's not, and how we feel very comfortable moving from the ancient context and changing it, right? We're making a change from what the Bible literally says and making an application that has the principle in mind, so therefore accomplishes the purpose of what the meaning of the text is. Other times we go, no, and it just needs to move all the way across. And so, especially when it comes to, like, Verkler gives the more controversial issue of women preaching and husband-wife roles, right? There's going to be egalitarian interpretations, which are like, there should be any gender roles. Everybody can do everything. It's all the same. And then there's going to be like really, really strict. No. It needs to be this. It needs to be that. A good example of that is head coverings in 1 Corinthians 11. I don't see any ladies in here with a head covering on. You got. Oh, see, then we got to get into the text. Yeah, that's good, because then we'd have to get into the text and see what it actually says, right? Oh, I love you so much. It's so good. Oh, it's so good. But notice, if I just reference 1 Corinthians 11 about head coverings, and then we don't actually look at it, right, and study it, what did it actually mean? One, what did it actually mean when Paul was talking about it? Then we're not going to understand any universal principles, whatever they are, and then whether we can apply it or not. The point that I'm trying to make here is sometimes it goes from here directly to here and it's the exact same, and sometimes we have to make a change to make it applicable in our cultural context. So sometimes the command is culturally conditioned and thus not normative for believers today. And then what's the methodology for determining whether we do that or not? So first, discern the principle. So whether it's explicit or inferred, that's the first point. Discern the principle. Oh man, what am I doing? Discern the principle. S-E-R-N. That's the first point. First, figure out what the principle is, right? Determine whether it's a timeless principle or culturally conditioned, right? So if it's timeless or time-bound, generally assume a transcultural, so timeless principle, unless evidence suggests otherwise, right? And so now it's either timeless or time-bound. And how do we determine that? If it's based on God's character, does God's character change? No, it doesn't. So, for example, an example of this would be there's 3 parts to the law. Does anybody know the 3 parts to the law in the Old Testament? There's the civil law, there's the ceremonial law, and there's the moral law. The moral law is based on God's character. Does that change? Thou shalt not steal. Is that gonna change from here to here? No, it's not gonna change. It's transcultural. It's timeless, right? The way that you sacrifice an animal in the tabernacle. Why aren't we sacrificing animals? So there's a lot of theology already in it, right? But it's a command. God gives those commands to the Israelites on how to worship, and those are commands, but they are time bound. They're culture bound, right? And they're fulfilled in Christ. So okay, we need to consider that. Assess behavioral application in our culture. Assess the application. So the application, if the principle is transcultural, evaluate if the original behavior, back here in that particular, if that original behavioral application given, is it appropriate now, or will it be an anachronistic oddity? Avoid conforming to the message. Avoid trying to be politically correct in our own culture. The criterion is whether it adequately and accurately expresses the God-given principle. So once we've determined the principle, and if it's a time-bound thing, our application, we want to look at our own cultural expression of the same principle and see if it adequately expresses that same principle. So the handshake is a good example, right? We don't give each other kisses. I mean, if you're over in Spain, you might get a kiss, or in Italy, that's within their culture. It would not be surprising to receive that. But in our culture, in America, that would be pretty weird. Be a little strange, right? Yeah, why? Yeah. Pretty common. Wow, I did not set my alarm. It's already 10:43. So we want to see if our expression expresses the same principle adequately. We suggest a cultural equivalent, so that'd be like the shaking of hands. And then this is what missionaries have to do when they're in different cultures and they're trying to teach the Bible. There might be cultural expressions in the culture that they're trying to witness to that might be different than where they came from. And so they have to consider that. And then if after careful study, the nature of the principle in command is still uncertain, then apply the biblical precept of humility. It's generally better to be over-scrupulous in our desire to obey God than to break a continuing requirement. So it's like, if you're still not sure, obey it as a command. It's better to be humble and be like, I'm not sure, but I don't want to disobey, so better to obey. There's a difference between, what we're going to do is differentiate between the behavior and the principle. So it's crucial to distinguish between the behavior specified, i.e. a holy kiss, and the principle expressed through that specific behavior, which in this case, the principle would be brotherly love. Are there lots of ways to express brotherly love? Yeah, those would be the applications. And then give the particulars of our cultural expression. So there's three ways it can happen. You can retain both the principle and the behavioral expression. So that would be like, all right, holy kiss, all the way over here, holy kiss. That would be one way to do it. Another would be retain the principle, but change the behavioral expression to a new culture. That would be holy kiss, brotherly love, shaking hands, which we're about to do. So hope you're ready to shake some hands. And then the other one is change both the principle and its behavioral expression, assuming both were culture bound. So then you see this and you go, you change the principle and the application. Usually not doing that, but there are some that do that. So the example, women's head coverings, retain this submission principle, right? It's a picture of submission, head coverings. And so you retain the head covering, that'd be the application. So it just moves straight across. There's head coverings here. It's the principle of submission. Retain head coverings. Or there's a principle of submission, but this is a culture-bound head covering thing. So we're gonna express submission in a different way in our culture. And what does that look like? Yes.
Just right off the bat. He's
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, female hairstyles. That's it. I'm just saying it from the mic, so it's on the thing. But yeah, let's say, I think our culture is trying to break apart all of those norms, or anything that would be feminine and masculine and fall into those categories. And so hairstyles would definitely, you can rebel against those norms by having a certain hairstyle, for sure, right? And then it's like, then the principle of submission is like, no, I don't want to be submitted to anybody. I'm going to rebel against that principle, and therefore I'm going to have this kind of hairstyle to express my rebellion against these antiquated norms, let's say, right? That goes against the principle and the application. That would be like the antithesis of that. Yep. And then you have, the last one would be the egalitarian philosophy, which would replace both submission and the application of and expressions of submission with egalitarianism, and I think that's really hard to get out of the Bible. All right, so that is all. Next week we'll look at some other examples, and we'll look at Mark. I know I said we'd look at Mark 6. I'm sorry. I know you're looking forward to it. We didn't do it. Come next week, we'll look at Jesus walking on the water in Mark chapter 6. It's so cool. There's so many things going on. It's so great. Oh, man. Just be thinking he's the new Moses as you're reading when he feeds the 5,000 and then he walks on the water. Like, there's so many little nuggets in there of like, they're in a desert place, and then they eat bread, and then they go through water, and it's like, he's in control of nature. And it's like, oh, the Exodus. Like, just think on those things and read. Oh, it's so beautiful. And then he says he wants to walk past them. Like, he wants to go by them. It's like, did God ever go by anybody? Yeah, he did. Did he declare his name? Yeah, he did. And it's like, Jesus shows up and he goes, don't worry, don't be afraid. It is I. It's ego eimi. It's like, in Greek, that's how it gets translated from the Hebrew into the Greek for God saying his name. Like, oh, he's saying he's Yahweh. Like, it's so cool. See, I was ready for today, but we got on this. But this is, also my plan is what I want to do is create, so like we went through all of the chapters, and I want to create basically a page summary and different questions that you can ask as you're doing your study of Scripture. So if you're doing the written contextual analysis, what are the things you want to look for? What are the questions you want to ask? That'll be on like one page. So it'll be like a page for historical cultural context, written contextual context, lexical syntactical, and it'll be a lot of the questions that you want to ask yourself as you're doing that study. And then theological, and then what kind of parts of speech, and man, we're just getting late. But I want to prepare that, and then that'll be the end. It will be. All right, cool. Let's pray, and then we definitely need to go. We'll say this one more time, and then we'll go upstairs, and then I will